A former U.S. Marine thought he had escaped the war by retreating to a quiet farm outside Clearwater Falls, living only with his retired canine and the memories he never spoke about. On the eve of a blizzard, while driving into town for supplies, he witnesses a police cruiser lose control on an icy bridge and plunge into a frozen river. Inside is a lone female officer, wounded, hunted, and carrying evidence meant to disappear. What looks like an accident is the final move of a corruption chase. As unmarked vehicles close in and radios fall silent, the Marine realizes the past he buried has been found. When his canine growls at the snow and refuses to retreat, the choice becomes unavoidable. Before dawn, one man will return to the river where it began and risk everything so the truth can live. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, subscribe for more stories of courage, sacrifice, and quiet miracles. The wind rose before the snow, a sharp, warning breath cutting across the frozen fields as the sky over Clearwater Falls turned the color of dull steel. Jack Miller drove with both hands steady on the worn steering wheel, his old pickup crawling along the narrow road that cut through the Montana farmland. He was 42, broad-shouldered, built from years of physical labor and something harder beneath it. His face was angular and weathered, with a short, neatly kept beard already threaded with gray. Deep lines ran from the corners of his eyes, not from age alone, but from a life spent squinting into sun, snow, and danger. He wore a heavy brown field jacket, its canvas faded at the elbows, the kind of jacket that had learned his shape over time. Jack spoke little, even to himself. Silence had become a habit after it became a refuge. Beside him sat Rex, a German shepherd with a powerful frame and sable coat darkened by winter light. At 7 years old, Rex moved with disciplined restraint, his amber eyes alert, tracking every shift of shadow along the road. One ear bore a small scar, a pale notch that marked his past. He was not just a dog. He carried himself like a professional, trained and trusted, a former canine who still remembered what it meant to work as part of a unit. Jack trusted Rex's instincts more than his own thoughts on days like this. Jack was heading into town for supplies before the storm closed the roads. It was a simple task, but nothing ever felt entirely simple anymore. As the truck climbed toward the bridge over the Clearwater River, Jack's mind drifted, as it often did, to Sarah. She had been tall and slender, with warm brown skin that freckled easily in the summer, and hair the color of dark honey, always tied back loosely, strands escaping no matter how carefully she fixed it. Sarah laughed easily, even when life was heavy, and she had possessed a quiet strength that steadied Jack during his years in uniform. When she died in a winter accident 3 years ago, something in him had folded inward, not broken, but bent and never fully straightened again. Clearwater Falls had been his retreat, not to forget her, but to survive the memory of her. The bridge came into view suddenly through blowing snow. Jack eased off the gas instinctively, his marine instincts never quite leaving him. That was when he saw the police cruiser. It slid sideways across the ice in a slow, unreal motion, tires screaming against nothing. The headlights flared, caught the guardrail, and then the car punched through it with a violent, metallic crack. Jack slammed on the brakes as the cruiser vanished over the edge, disappearing into the dark, open water below. Time narrowed. Jack was already out of the truck before the engine fully died. Rex leapt after him without command. The river was not fully frozen here. Black water churned between jagged sheets of ice, swallowing the cruiser as it sank nose first. A woman burst through the shattered driver's window, gasping, her movements frantic and uncoordinated. She was young, late 20s at most, her dark blonde hair pulled into a tight bun that had come loose, strands plastered to her pale face. Her uniform was soaked, heavy, dragging her down as she clawed toward the bank. Jack plunged into the water without hesitation. The cold was a physical blow, seizing his muscles, stealing breath. He reached her just as her strength failed, gripping her vest and hauling her toward the edge. Rex waded in beside him, teeth carefully catching the woman's sleeve, pulling in practiced coordination. Together they dragged her onto the snow-covered bank. The woman lay, shaking violently, lips already tinged blue. Her badge read Officer Emily Parker. Her face was sharp and focused even through shock, hazel eyes fluttering open for a moment before closing again. Jack stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around her, his movements efficient, controlled. "You're safe," he said quietly, more command than comfort, the way he'd spoken to wounded soldiers once. Rex stood over her, body tense, steam rising from his fur. As Jack checked her breathing, Rex's posture changed. The dog stiffened, a low growl rumbling from his chest, eyes fixed not on the river, but on the woman herself. Jack followed Rex's gaze and frowned. Beneath Emily's open uniform jacket, just below the edge of her body armor, dark red stained the fabric. It wasn't fresh. The blood had already begun to dry. Rex growled again, sharper now. Jack's hand paused mid-movement. Accidents didn't leave old blood. The wind howled across the bridge, carrying snow and questions neither of them could answer yet. The storm arrived faster than the forecast had promised, swallowing the road behind Jack Miller's truck within minutes as snow thickened into blinding sheets. He drove with deliberate caution, Rex sitting rigid beside him, the German shepherd's wet fur already crusting with ice along his spine. The pickup crawled toward the turnoff that led to Jack's farm, its headlights cutting shallow tunnels through the whiteout. Jack's jaw was set, his expression carved into something unreadable. But inside his chest, a familiar tension coiled tight, the same quiet urgency he had carried through nights overseas when decisions had to be made without certainty, only consequence. He reached the farmhouse at the edge of the fields just as the wind rose into a full howl, rocking the old wooden structure like a warning. Inside, the house was spare but orderly, built for function rather than comfort. Jack moved with practiced efficiency, laying Officer Emily Parker carefully on the couch near the wood stove. She was small-framed, athletic in the way of someone accustomed to long shifts and physical stress, her pale skin mottled from cold, lips trembling uncontrollably. Her dark blonde hair, once tightly restrained, now clung to her temples in damp strands. Jack fed the stove until the fire roared, then knelt beside her, checking her pulse, her breathing, the slow return of color to her cheeks. Hypothermia, moderate but dangerous. He'd seen worse. He'd also seen people die from less. Rex shook violently near the door, spraying meltwater across the floorboards, then settled at Emily's side, eyes never leaving her face. At 7 years old, Rex was past the reckless energy of youth, his movements economical, his presence grounding. Jack trusted that focus. Rex had been trained for this kind of vigilance, for moments when instinct mattered more than noise. Jack reached for his phone and dialed 911. Nothing but static. He tried again, stepping closer to the window, then outside onto the porch, where the wind cut like a blade. Still nothing. He went back in, grabbed the radio from Emily's belt, dried it as best he could, and attempted to power it on. The screen flickered, then died completely. Water damage. He exhaled slowly, frustration held in check. This wasn't concealment. This was isolation. He pulled off Emily's soaked jacket next, speaking to her quietly, even though she didn't respond. "I'm going to get you dry. Stay with me." Beneath the heavy outer layer was her uniform shirt and the edge of a standard-issue ballistic vest. As he eased her onto her side to remove the wet fabric, his fingers brushed against something firm inside the inner pocket of the jacket, positioned carefully where it wouldn't shift during movement. He froze for half a second, then slid it free. A small, rectangular object tightly wrapped in waterproof material and sealed with tape. Not a phone, not a wallet. Jack didn't open it. He simply set it on the table, his eyes narrowing slightly. His thoughts drifted, uninvited, to Sarah again. She would have told him not to overthink it, would have reminded him that helping didn't require permission. Sarah had been the kind of woman who believed deeply in doing the right thing, even when it complicated life. Tall, graceful without trying, her skin warm and sun-kissed even in winter, she'd moved through the world with a calm assurance that softened Jack's sharper edges. Losing her hadn't made him cruel, it had made him careful. And tonight, care meant keeping this woman alive until help could reach them. Hours passed slowly. The storm pressed against the house, snow piling high against the windows. Jack made soup, the simple act grounding him, something solid to do while waiting. He checked Emily's temperature again, then again. Rex shifted closer each time she stirred, the low rumble in his chest easing as her breathing steadied. Outside, a tree cracked under the weight of ice, the sound echoing like a distant gunshot. Jack flinched before he caught himself. Sometime after midnight, Emily's eyes opened. Confusion clouded her gaze at first, then awareness sharpened it as she focused on the unfamiliar ceiling, the firelight, the man standing a few feet away. Jack saw the exact moment her training kicked in. Her hand twitched toward where her weapon should have been. "Easy," Jack said calmly, raising one hand. "You're safe. You went into the river. I pulled you out." Her eyes flicked to Rex, then back to Jack. Fear flashed, then something deeper. Calculation. She tried to sit up and failed, a sharp intake of breath betraying pain she hadn't yet voiced. That was when she saw the object on the table. Her reaction was immediate and visceral. Her breath hitched, eyes locking onto the wrapped item as if it were a live thing. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, her voice hoarse but edged with panic. "It was in your jacket," Jack replied evenly. He didn't move toward it. He didn't move away. "I didn't open it." Her gaze snapped back to him, searching his face, measuring him the way he'd seen soldiers assess strangers in hostile territory. For a moment, it looked like she might say something more. Instead, she swallowed and looked away, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "You shouldn't have it," she said finally, quieter now. Jack nodded once. "Then tell me what it is." She didn't. The fire cracked and popped between them, the storm roaring outside as if pressing closer. Rex shifted, placing his head on the edge of the couch, eyes moving from Emily to Jack and back again, a silent sentinel. Whatever that object was, Jack understood one thing with absolute clarity. This night was not going to end the way it should have. Morning came reluctantly, a thin gray light pushing through the storm clouds and settling over the farmhouse like a held breath. The wind had eased, but the cold remained, heavy and absolute, pressing against the walls. Jack Miller rose before the fire burned low, his body tuned to early hours after years of waking before dawn. He moved quietly, broad frame, careful not to creak the old floorboards, and fed the stove until warmth returned to the room. Rex lifted his head from the rug, amber eyes clear despite a restless night, his sable coat still damp at the edges. The dog stretched once and stood, every motion economical, then resumed his post near the couch where Officer Emily Parker slept. Emily's color had improved. The violent shivering was gone, replaced by a deep, exhausted stillness. When she finally opened her eyes, they focused more steadily than before, hazel irises sharp with awareness. She was 29, Jack guessed, with a compact, athletic build that spoke of long shifts and training rather than vanity. Her face was narrow, cheekbones pronounced, lips pale but firm, and there was a faint scar along her jawline, the kind that suggested an old bar fight or a careless doorframe during a foot pursuit. She pushed herself upright slowly, wincing once, then steadied her breath. Pride kept her from asking for help. Jack handed her a mug of coffee, black, strong, the way he took it. "Easy," he said, voice even. "You're stable. Storm's still sitting on us." She accepted the mug, hands wrapping around it for warmth, eyes flicking to the table. The wrapped object was still there. Her shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. "You didn't open it," she said. Not quite a question. "No," Jack replied. "Didn't need to." That earned a brief, humorless smile. Emily took a sip, then set the mug down carefully, as if preparing herself. "It's a USB drive," she said at last. "Encrypted." Redundant backups, names, transactions, dates. Her voice stayed level, but the words carried weight. Evidence of a corruption ring inside the Clearwater Falls Police Department. Jack didn't react outwardly. Years ago, news like that would have sent him straight into motion. Now it settled in his chest like a stone. He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, beard catching the light. "Why you?" Emily met his gaze. "Because I was quiet. I didn't drink with them, didn't borrow money, didn't owe favors." She hesitated, then added, "And because I made the mistake of trusting the wrong mentor." She explained how it had begun with missing evidence and sealed reports that vanished overnight, how she followed money trails that led not out of town, but deeper into it. Clearwater Falls was small, insular, a place where people recognized your truck before they knew your name. She had gathered proof carefully, alone, copying files late at night, hiding the drive where no one thought to look. The night before the storm, she realized they knew. Her cruiser had been tampered with, brakes weakened just enough. The bridge hadn't been an accident, it had been an exit. Jack listened, jaw tight. He thought of Sarah again, of the way she used to say that good people didn't get to choose whether they were part of the world's uglier truths. They only chose how they responded. Sarah had been patient with his silences, quick to forgive his temper when it surfaced, her dark eyes steady even when his were hard. Losing her had carved a space in him that peace filled but never erased. "I didn't want to bring this to you," Emily said quietly, eyes dropping to Rex as the dog shifted closer, sensing the tension. "I was just trying to get out." "Get it to someone who could act." Jack exhaled through his nose. "I don't want trouble," he said. "I left all that behind." "I know," she replied. "But trouble doesn't care what you want." The day wore on, the light fading early as snow thickened again. Jack shoveled the porch and cleared a path to the barn, his muscles welcoming the work even as his mind stayed restless. Rex paced the perimeter, stopping often to sniff the wind. Emily rested, then insisted on helping, moving stiffly but refusing to be useless. She washed dishes, her movements precise, controlled, the way she did everything. There was a steadiness to her that Jack recognized, born not from fearlessness, but from familiarity with it. By late afternoon, the sky darkened. Snow fell harder, muffling sound, changing distance into illusion. Rex's ears snapped forward. He rose in one smooth motion and moved to the window, a low bark breaking from his chest. Jack followed his line of sight. At first, there was nothing but white. Then, faintly, twin points of light appeared far down the road, bobbing through the storm. Another pair followed close behind. Headlights, low and steady. Emily saw them too. Her face drained of what little color it had regained. "They shouldn't be out there," she said. "Not in this weather." Jack's shoulders squared, the old Marine posture surfacing without effort. He reached for the binoculars hanging by the door, glass cold against his hands. Through the swirling snow, he caught the shape of two vehicles moving in formation. Large. Boxy, no visible markings. Rex growled, deeper now, a warning rather than alarm. Jack lowered the binoculars. "Those aren't locals," he said. And they're not lost. The lights drew closer, cutting through the storm with purpose. 2 black SUVs, no plates visible, engines quiet for their size. Jack felt the decision settle in his bones before he spoke it. The night had brought answers, and with them, consequences. The engines stopped just short of the farmhouse, their low hum swallowed by the wind as snow continued to fall in thick, blinding sheets. Jack Miller watched from the shadow beside the window, his broad frame still, his breathing slow and controlled. Years ago, this posture had meant preparation for contact. He had hoped never to stand like this again. Outside, the headlights cut across the yard with deliberate patience, not the wandering sweep of lost travelers, but the precise arcs of men who knew exactly where they were. 2 figures stepped out first. Both were tall, wrapped in black winter coats too clean for men who lived in Clearwater Falls. Their boots sank into the snow without hesitation, movements confident, economical. One of them raised a gloved hand in a casual wave toward the house. He was in his late 40s, Jack guessed. Thick neck, shaved head catching the pale light, a trimmed beard lining a square jaw. His posture was relaxed in a way that suggested rehearsed authority. The second man stayed half a step behind, leaner, younger, eyes hidden behind dark lenses despite the fading light. He scanned the tree line more than the house. Emily Parker stood behind Jack, her face drawn tight. "They're not supposed to know I'm here," she whispered. Her voice held fear now, but also something sharper, recognition. "They're saying they're here to protect me." Jack didn't answer immediately. He watched the spacing between the men, the way the second SUV idled with its wheels angled outward for a fast exit. He had spent too many years watching patrols and ambushes to mistake this for local police procedure. "Clearwater cops don't move like that," he said quietly. "They don't bring 2 unmarked vehicles into a storm like this unless they expect trouble." A knock sounded on the door, firm but polite. "Officer Parker," the bearded man called out, voice amplified by the cold. "We're here to take you somewhere safe." Jack felt the old reflex rise, sharp and unwelcome. He glanced at Rex. The German Shepherd stood perfectly still, muscles coiled, ears forward, a low vibration building in his chest. 7 years old, scarred ear, amber eyes fixed on the door. Rex remembered nights like this too. Jack stepped back, lowering his voice. "We're leaving. Now." He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled aside the heavy rug near the kitchen. Beneath it lay a reinforced wooden hatch, its edges worn but solid. He had built it years ago, shortly after Sarah died. Not because he expected an attack, but because habit had taught him that safety was something you prepared for before you needed it. The ladder beneath descended into darkness. Emily stared at it, disbelief flickering across her face. "You planned for this?" "I planned to be left alone," Jack replied. "That's not the same thing, but it looks similar." Another knock, louder this time. "Jack Miller," the man outside called, voice still calm. "We know you're in there. Let's not make this complicated." Emily flinched at Jack's name. He felt the weight of it settle in his chest. Rex let out a sharp bark, then stopped at a single raised finger from Jack. The dog moved first, descending the ladder without sound. Emily followed, gripping the rungs with stiff fingers, her movements careful but fast. Jack replaced the hatch and rug just as the doorknob turned. The hidden passage was narrow, reinforced with old timber and metal plates salvaged from the barn. Jack moved through it by memory, boots silent on packed earth. The tunnel sloped downward, then angled away from the house, emerging several hundred yards into the forest, where the snow lay undisturbed beneath thick pine cover. The cold hit hard as they emerged, the wind carrying the faint sound of voices and boots crunching near the farmhouse. Gunfire cracked suddenly, sharp and close. A warning shot, Jack knew. Not meant to kill, yet. Rex surged forward, taking point, moving low and fast through the trees. Emily stumbled once, catching herself against a trunk, breath coming fast. Jack grabbed her arm, steadying her without slowing. They ran blind for several minutes, snow filling their lungs, branches clawing at coats. Jack angled them downhill, away from the road, toward terrain only locals and hunters knew. Another shot echoed, closer this time. Bark exploded from a tree beside them. Emily gasped. "Move," Jack ordered, voice cutting through panic. Rex veered sharply, leading them onto a narrow trail barely visible beneath the snow. It twisted between rocks and fallen timber, invisible to anyone without experience, or a dog trained to find paths where none seemed to exist. They didn't stop until the sounds faded into the storm. Jack crouched behind a cluster of boulders, scanning the darkness, heart steady despite the rush of adrenaline he had sworn off years ago. Emily leaned against the rock, chest heaving, her face pale but her eyes clear. "I didn't want this to touch anyone else," she said, voice shaking now that the danger had passed. "Especially not you." Jack said nothing. He was listening to the forest, to Rex's breathing as the dog circled once and settled, satisfied they were not being followed. Yet. Emily swallowed hard. "There's something else you need to know," she said. The man running this, he didn't just stumble onto the evidence. He ordered background checks on anyone near me. When your name came up, it wasn't just a name to him. Jack turned to her slowly. "They know who you are," Emily continued. "They know you're a former Marine. A K-9 handler. That you didn't leave the service because you failed, but because your wife died and you walked away." Her voice dropped. "You weren't an accident in this. You were a variable." The words landed heavier than the gunfire had. Jack looked down at Rex, at the steady presence he'd trusted with his life once before. The past he had buried had just been dug up by men who should not have been there. Snow had softened the forest into a muffled maze by nightfall, but Jack Miller no longer moved like a man avoiding conflict. He moved like someone who had accepted it. The panic that had driven him through the trees hours earlier was gone, replaced by a cold, methodical calm he hadn't felt in years. He guided Emily deeper into the timberline until the ground dipped and the wind lost its bite, choosing terrain that broke lines of sight and sound alike. Rex worked ahead, nose low, tail steady, reading the forest as fluently as Jack read angles and shadows. Together they were not running anymore. They were repositioning. Jack found a rock overhang half buried by snow, a natural pocket formed where granite leaned into earth. He settled Emily there, checked her breathing, and handed her his extra gloves. She watched him with a mixture of gratitude and fear, the realization dawning that the man beside her was no longer improvising. He was planning. Jack stripped his jacket and wrapped it tighter around her shoulders. The field jacket revealed a dark, thermal layer beneath, military grade, worn thin but intact. He remembered Sarah teasing him once for never throwing old gear away. She had been slim and tall, her dark, honey-colored hair usually braided over one shoulder, skin warm even in winter. Sarah believed some things earned the right to stay. "Tonight," Jack agreed. He pulled a battered satellite phone from the inner pocket of his pack, its casing scarred and dull. He hadn't used it since the day he'd sworn off the man he used to be, but he'd never sold it. Rex sat at his side, ears swiveling, listening to distant movement that hadn't yet reached Jack's range. The phone took a moment to connect. Then a voice came through, low and cautious. "Identify," the man said. "Jack Miller," Jack replied. "Haven't spoken in a while." A pause, then a breath. "Hell of a way to reconnect." The voice belongs to Thomas Reed, mid-40s, now with the FBI after leaving the Marines a decade earlier. Reed had always been lean and hawk-faced, sharp eyes set beneath a permanent squint from years in desert glare. He was calm to the point of irritability, a man who hated waste and surprises in equal measure. Jack explained quickly. USB, corruption, pursuit, location. Reed listened without interruption. "I can move a team," Reed said when Jack finished, "but weather and distance mean 24 hours. You can hold?" Jack looked at Rex, at Emily huddled against the rock, snow dusting her hair. "I can," he said. He ended the call before Reed could offer reassurance. He didn't need it. The first contact came sooner than Jack expected. Footsteps crunched too evenly to be animals, approaching from the ridge. Jack moved uphill, away from Emily, circling wide. Rex stayed with him, silent and focused. A figure appeared through the trees, rifle slung low, breath steaming. Jack used the snow and slope, shifting position until the man's profile lined up against the moonlit clearing. He waited, counting steps, timing breath. When the shot cracked, it wasn't lethal, deliberate, controlled. The man stumbled, weapon clattering. The response was immediate. Muzzle flashes bloomed between trunks. Jack moved again, firing once more, forcing them to spread. Rex broke cover on command, a blur of muscle and snow, intercepting a third man as he raised his rifle. The shot went wide, but the bark of the gun tore through Rex's shoulder. The dog yelped once, then kept moving, slamming into the man's legs and taking him down hard. Jack reached them in seconds, disarming the shooter with practiced efficiency. Rex collapsed beside him, blood dark against pale fur. Jack pressed a gloved hand to the wound, voice steady. "You're good," he told the dog, more promise than assessment. Rex's eyes stayed locked on him, trusting, unbroken. The man on the ground groaned as Jack bound his wrists. He was in his late 30s, rugged, with a broken nose that had healed poorly, and a beard grown out of neglect rather than style. His eyes widened as Jack hauled him upright. Recognition flickered there, not personal but professional. "Still clear rooms the same way," the man rasped. "Left side first, never changed." Jack froze. He leaned closer, studying the man's face. Memory surfaced reluctantly. A staging area overseas, a shared cigarette, nothing more. "You were logistics," Jack said. "Different unit, different command." The man laughed weakly. "Different paycheck now." Emily approached cautiously, seeing Rex's blood and Jack's expression. "You know him," she said. "I know the type," Jack replied. He looked back at the man. "You didn't track me by accident." "No," the man admitted. "Your file flagged when you pulled her from the river. Canine handler. Terrain specialist. We knew you'd go to ground." He coughed, spitting blood into the snow. "Boss said to move fast." Jack's jaw tightened. The past he had buried hadn't stayed buried. It had been mapped, indexed, weaponized. He secured the man behind a tree and returned to Rex, binding the wound properly this time. The dog whined softly, tail thumping once despite the pain. "We're not done," Emily said quietly. "No," Jack agreed. He lifted Rex carefully, settling him where Emily could keep pressure on the bandage. The forest was still, but Jack knew that silence was temporary. He checked his watch, then the sky. 24 hours was a long time, but he had chosen this ground, and he was done running. The forest did not sleep. It listened. Snow hissed as it fell through branches, and every sound carried farther than it should have. Jack Miller felt the pressure closing in long before he saw movement. Boots testing the ground, radios kept low, men spreading to cut-off angles. He knelt beside Rex, fingers firm on the bandage at the dog's shoulder, and met Emily Parker's eyes. She was steadier now, pain controlled, fear sharpened into focus. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back again, imperfect but functional, and there was resolve in the way she held herself, that reminded Jack of soldiers who had decided not to break. "They're coming from the ridge and the creek bed," Jack said quietly. "Too many to hold off and keep you moving." Emily understood what he meant before he finished. "No," she said. "We stayed together." Jack shook his head once. He had made the calculation already. The river lay a quarter-mile downslope, its banks jagged where ice gave way to water. Beyond it, the old ranger station sat abandoned, a squat timber structure half buried by drifts, its roof sagging but intact. Thomas Reed's coordinates had been precise. "You go," Jack said. "Follow Rex. He knows the way. Keep pressure on the wound. Don't stop unless he stops." Rex raised his head as if the words were meant for him alone. 7 years old, scarred ear, eyes clear despite the pain. He leaned into Jack's hand once, a silent promise. Emily's jaw clenched. "I won't leave you." Jack's gaze softened for the briefest moment. He saw Sarah, then, not as she'd been at the end, pale in hospital light, but as she'd stood in their kitchen years ago, tall and slim, hair the color of dark honey falling loose over her shoulders, skin warm from the summer sun. Sarah had believed in choosing people over fear. She would have understood this choice, even if she hated it. "This is how we all get out," he said. "Move." A burst of gunfire cracked through the trees, closer now. Bark exploded from a pine trunk 10 yards away. Jack rose, already backing toward the slope. "Go," he ordered. Rex moved first, limping but fast, nose down, choosing a line through the timber that avoided open ground. Emily followed, heart hammering, forcing herself not to look back. Jack turned the opposite way, angling uphill just enough to draw pursuit. He fired twice, not to kill, but to announce himself, then ran. The river greeted him with its familiar roar, louder now, angrier, black water grinding against ice shelves that groaned under pressure. Snow blinded distance, turning the far bank into a suggestion rather than a certainty. Jack took position behind a fallen cottonwood, breath steady despite the burn in his lungs. He counted footsteps, measured cadence. These men were trained, not soldiers, too sloppy under stress, but not civilians either. The first silhouette broke cover. Jack fired, dropping him into the snow with a cry. Another followed, then another, muzzle flashes strobing the white. Jack shifted positions between shots, forcing them to spread, drawing them closer to the river where footing betrayed confidence. He felt the old rhythm return, the one he had buried when Sarah died, the sense of time narrowing to purpose. A round tore through his side, hot and blunt, knocking the breath from him. Jack staggered, caught himself on ice, and fired once more. Pain sharpened the world. He took 2 steps back, heels slipping on a glassy edge he hadn't seen. The river surged, loud as artillery. Another shot cracked. Jack's foot went out from under him. He fell. Cold swallowed sound. The shock punched the air from his chest, the water searing his skin through layers of gear. He went under once, twice, boots scraping stone as he fought the current. The river here was shallow near the bank, broken by rocks and roots, but the flow was relentless. Jack caught a half-submerged branch, fingers locking by instinct, body slamming hard against ice. He hauled himself toward the edge, breath tearing back into his lungs as he broke the surface. On the bank above, a figure skidded to a stop. Emily. She had doubled back without realizing it, following Rex's path, only to lose him in the storm and circle toward the sound of gunfire. She saw Jack at the water's edge, blood darkening the snow, and then she saw the river claim him again as the branch snapped. Jack vanished beneath the black. "No!" Emily screamed, the sound ripped away by wind. Gunfire chased her from the bank. She stumbled back, slipping, falling, hands numb as the darkness closed in. She saw only the water after that, black, endless, convinced it had taken him. Rex appeared through the trees, barking once, sharp and urgent, tugging at her sleeve with his teeth. Emily let herself be pulled, sobbing, mind fixed on the image of Jack sinking beneath the ice. Behind them the river roared on, indifferent and alive, hiding what it had not yet finished with. Dawn broke pale and brittle over Clearwater Falls, the storm finally loosening its grip. Sirens cut through the quiet as black SUVs and marked vehicles carved paths through snowdrifts toward the river and the abandoned ranger station. FBI agents moved with disciplined urgency, weapons low but ready, breath steaming in the cold. At their center was Thomas Reed, his lean frame wrapped in a dark field coat, sharp eyes scanning the tree line the way they always had. He had waited a lifetime for operations like this to end cleanly. He did not expect miracles. Emily Parker sat on the steps of the ranger station, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her hands clenched around a paper cup she hadn't touched. Her face was ashen, eyes fixed on the river beyond the trees. She had told them everything, about the USB, the ambush, the men who weren't police. She had told them about Jack Miller falling into the black water. She did not cry anymore. Shock had taken that from her, leaving a hollow resolve in its place. When an agent tried to ask again for details, she shook her head once. "He's gone," she said. The words sounded unreal even to her. The arrests came quickly. Corrupt officers were pulled from vehicles, hands zip-tied behind their backs, their protests swallowed by the wind. Evidence was secured, radios crackled with confirmations, and a line that had poisoned the town for years collapsed in a single morning. Clearwater Falls exhaled without knowing why. But for Emily, none of it mattered. Justice felt distant and abstract compared to the weight pressing on her chest. Then Rex appeared. He emerged from the trees along the riverbank, limping hard now, his sable coat matted with ice and blood, eyes burning with urgency. He barked once, sharp and commanding, then turned back toward the water, tugging at something invisible. An agent swore under his breath and ran. Reed followed, boots slipping as he crested the bank. Rex dug his paws into the snow and pulled. Jack Miller came with him. Jack's body was half in the shallows, half on frozen mud, his jacket stiff with ice, face gray but breathing, ragged, shallow, alive. The thermal layers beneath his coat had done their job, trapping heat just long enough. Training had done the rest. Cold water survival, controlled breathing, muscle memory that refused to let him drown quietly. He coughed, water spilling from his mouth, and Rex leaned into his chest, barking again as if scolding him for being late. Emily screamed his name before anyone could stop her. She ran, slipping, falling to her knees beside him. Her hands shook as she touched his face, searching for warmth. Jack's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, then found her. For a second he looked confused, like a man waking from a dream he didn't want to leave. Then he smiled, small, crooked, unmistakably Jack. "Told you to go," he rasped. Emily laughed and cried at once, pressing her forehead to his. "You don't get to die," she said fiercely. "Not like that. Not after all this." Medics moved in, efficient and gentle. Rex finally allowed himself to lie down, exhaustion overtaking adrenaline, tail thumping weakly when Emily reached back to touch him. Reed watched it all in silence, the corners of his mouth lifting just enough to betray relief. He had seen Rivers take good men before. He was grateful this one had given one back. Months passed. Snow melted into mud, then into green. Trials concluded. Sentences were handed down. Clearwater Falls learned the truth in pieces, then all at once. Emily resigned from her old department and accepted a position closer to home, choosing a quieter badge over ambition. She stayed. Jack healed slowly, scars knitting into reminders rather than warnings. He rebuilt the fence on his land, fixed the roof he had ignored for years, and stopped pretending the past couldn't catch up to him. Rex healed too, a thin white line marking his shoulder, worn like a medal he never asked for. Sometimes Jack dreamed of Sarah. In the dreams, she stood by the river, tall and calm, dark honey hair catching the light, skin warm even in shadow. She never spoke. She only watched, as if making sure he understood that surviving was not a betrayal. Waking from those dreams no longer felt like failure. It felt like permission. Emily visited often at first, then simply stayed. Evenings found the three of them on the porch, coffee steaming, Rex sprawled at their feet, the river murmuring in the distance. Silence between them grew comfortable. Trust replaced vigilance. Jack stopped flinching at sudden sounds. Emily stopped looking over her shoulder. One afternoon, standing by the river where it had all begun, Emily asked quietly, "Do you ever think about what it took?" Jack looked at the water, clear now, sunlight breaking across its surface. "Every day," he said, "but I think about what it gave back more." Rex barked softly, as if in agreement. The storm had tested 3 lives and nearly broken them. Instead, it carved space for something new. What emerged was not a miracle in the way people liked to tell stories. It was harder than that. Quieter. It was a family forged not by blood, but by choice, by trust earned in cold water and kept in the light that followed. Sometimes the miracle is not that the storm stops, but that a hand reaches out in the middle of it. In the cold river and the blinding snow, grace moved quietly, through courage, through loyalty, through a choice to protect a stranger at great cost. Many call it coincidence, others call it strength. But those who believe know this truth. God often works through ordinary people, placing them at the exact moment they are needed. A dog that refuses to let go. A man who stands when he could run. A life spared not by luck, but by purpose. In our daily lives, we face storms that leave no visible scars: fear, loss, exhaustion, loneliness. Yet even there, unseen hands are at work. A kind word, a second chance, a person who shows up when hope feels thin. These are small miracles too. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you to be that light for someone else today. Please share this story with those who may need hope. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue telling stories of faith, courage, and grace. May God bless you, protect you, and guide you through every storm you face. Amen.